right, let's dive into this. Australian international education. Things are getting pretty dramatic down under.
Yeah, wild stuff.
It is. So we've got this whole thing where the government wanted to put a cap on how many foreign students could come in. And
Didn't exactly go to plan?
no, it didn't. It got completely blocked, and now everyone's kind of scrambling, trying to figure out what's next.
It is a fascinating situation, isn't it? I mean, you've got this plan that seems pretty straightforward. They're trying to manage migration, right, using education policy, and it just blew up in their faces.
Well, let's break it down a little bit. The initial plan, right? You've got the Australian government, Labour Party's in charge, and they're looking at, housing costs going through the roof, migration numbers like record-breaking.
Yeah.
So their solution, cap on international students. They said, okay, 270,000 for 2024, that's it. Seems pretty logical, right? On the surface, at least.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a pretty standard approach, but, there was pushback. And from some pretty surprising places.
Oh, this is where it gets really interesting. Okay, so you've got the coalition, the other big party, right? They're saying, hold on, this is not thought out very well, these caps. They're not really going to fix the problem. But then...
And then you've got the Greens.
The Greens.
Who you don't often see siding with the coalition.
Never.
But they teamed up and they blocked the whole thing.
Completely blocked it. And it's interesting because the Greens, their argument was essentially, look, you're unfairly targeting international students here. You're making them the scapegoats for this bigger migration issue.
It makes you wonder what this means for them going forward. Does this signal some kind of shift in their priorities? Are they going to start putting international students first, especially with elections coming up?
It's a big question. And of course, we can't forget the drama. I mean,
with the mudslinging.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Education Minister Jason Clare, opposition leader Peter Dutton.
They did not hold back.
Not at all. I mean, Clare straight up called Dutton a fraud when it comes to immigration.
Yeah.
Dutton shot back. Said the whole thing was chaotic and confused, the government's handling of it. You can just feel the tension, reading those quotes.
You can just imagine them going head to head, right? I mean, both of them trying to appeal to voters who are worried about migration, but fundamentally such different approaches to the problem.
Totally. So now we've got this plan. It's blocked. What happens? Universities, colleges, they're all left in limbo.
Total chaos. I mean, imagine you're running a university, right? You've already made cuts based on these caps that were supposed to come in. You've probably rejected students.
Yeah.
And now, what do you do?
It's a mess.
Yeah.
And people in the education sector, they're not holding back about how worried they are.
Oh, yeah, they're speaking out. Phil Honeywood, he's from the International Education Association of Australia. He's been pretty vocal, saying, look, where's the plan B? What's the government going to do now?
And Luke Sheehy from Universities Australia, he's saying the same thing. And he's really concerned about this thing called Ministerial Direction 107. Basically, it's this immigration policy that's become the main way they're controlling the flow of international students right now.
Yeah, and it's controversial.
Very controversial.
It was put in place in December 2023, and the idea was to try and weed out students who weren't really there to study, They wanted to focus on the low-risk students, which in practice often means students from certain countries or those who are going to big established universities in the cities.
So it might sound good on paper, but...
Yeah, but it's had some knock-on effects.
Unintended consequences.
Totally. Smaller institutions, private colleges, especially the ones that aren't in the big cities, they're really struggling to attract international students now. And because those caps are gone, this Ministerial Direction 107 is like the only tool they've got left.
It's kind of like they tried to fix one problem.
And created a whole bunch of new ones?
Exactly. But before we get too deep into the weeds of that specific policy, let's zoom out a bit.
Yeah, big picture.
The big picture. How does all of this fit into Australia's overall approach to migration?
Right, because it's not just about international students, is it? I mean, the government's been trying all sorts of things to control migration in general. They've raised the English language requirements for student visas, increased the fees.
Yeah, making it tougher and more expensive.
Exactly. It's all about trying to, fine-tune things.
Manage who gets to come in.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, and this might surprise you. Even with all those efforts, migration to Australia is still really high.
Stubbornly high.
It seems counterintuitive, right?
It does.
Yeah.
But I think this is where it's really important to understand the details of the migration data. Because one of the things that's happening is that students are choosing to stay longer after they graduate.
Taking advantage of those work opportunities.
Exactly. So they might come in on a student visa, but then they stay on and work, which adds to the overall migration numbers. And then, of course, you've also got a lot of New Zealanders and backpackers coming in as well.
Adding to the mix.
It's complex, isn't it?
It really is. It's like this web of policies, political maneuvering, unexpected outcomes.
It's enough to make your head spin.
It really is.
Yeah.
So what now? I mean, the government's got to do something, right? There's a lot of pressure to come up with a new plan, something that balances managing migration, but also keeping those benefits that international education brings.
The economic benefits.
Yeah, the cultural benefits.
And the Greens are in a really powerful position now, aren't they? I mean, they could have a big say in what happens next.
Especially with those elections on the horizon.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if they continue to put international students front and center.
So we've covered a lot here. It's a pretty complicated story.
It is.
What are your initial thoughts on all this? What really jumps out at you?
Well, for me, I think it's a good example of how, even when you try to do something good, there can be these unintended consequences, like those caps on enrollment. The intention was good, trying to address those concerns about housing and migration, but blocking them has just led to a bigger reliance on this ministerial Direction 107, which is causing its own set of problems.
And it's easy to get lost in all the policy talk.
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, this is about people.
Real people's lives.
Students who are caught in the middle of all of this.
It's a reminder that policy decisions, especially when it comes to something as complex as migration and education, there are rarely easy answers.
So true. It feels like Australia's kind of walking a tightrope right now.
Yeah.
But I think for our listeners, even if they're not international students themselves, this is a story that matters.
Oh, it absolutely matters. I mean, international education is huge for Australia.
That's huge.
Billions of dollars.
Economically.
Yeah, and it's not just about the money. These students bring so much to the country, different perspectives, different experiences. It makes Australia a more vibrant, more interesting place.
And on a global scale, what's happening in Australia, it's not unique, is it? Lots of countries are struggling with this same challenge.
Yeah, how do you manage migration but also keep your country attractive to international students? It's a dilemma.
So Australia's experience, it could be a lesson for other countries, right? A cautionary tale, maybe?
Or maybe even a model. It shows just how important it is to think these policies through carefully, because the consequences, they can be far-reaching.
Okay, so we've looked at the facts, the politics, the big picture. But this is a deep dive, and what would a deep dive be without a little bit of food for thought?
Something to chew on.
Exactly. So for our listeners, here's something to think about. What does all of this mean for Australia as a place to study in the future? Can it stay a top destination even with these tighter migration controls? And what about the long-term impacts, economically, culturally? Will Australia be able to find that balance?
It's a real balancing act. No easy answers.
No, not at all.
But the more we understand these issues, the better equipped we are, right? To have those conversations, to maybe even come up with some solutions.
So there you have it. Quite the deep dive, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Unexpected alliances, policy twists and turns, and a whole lot of uncertainty. I think it's safe to say the future of international education in Australia, it's hanging in the balance. And this story is far from over.
We've covered a lot of ground, but we've really only scratched the surface. After a quick break, we'll be back to explore some potential scenarios for the future and delve into the broader implications of this story for international education worldwide. Stay with us.
It's kind of crazy to think about, right? What happens in Australia, it could actually impact the whole global scene when it comes to international students.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you start messing with those policies, the ripple effects, they can be huge.
Absolutely. One thing I've been thinking about is, what if this whole thing actually shifts the balance of power? Where students decide to go.
Makes sense.
If Australia is making things tougher, maybe students start looking at other countries, places that seem a bit more welcoming,
Yeah, like Canada's been really stepping up their game lately.
Yeah.
Trying to position themselves as the new hotspot for international students.
Right, and you've got places in Europe too, Germany, Netherlands, they're becoming more and more popular.
It's almost like this, competition is heating up.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a global marketplace for education. Countries are putting together these packages,
Yeah.
trying to lure in the best and brightest with scholarships, work opportunities, promises of maybe even a path to permanent residency.
And students, they're getting smarter, right? They're shopping around, comparing their options. They're looking for the best deal, the best fit for their goals.
It's definitely empowering for students, gives them more choices. And for countries, well, the more diverse your student population, the more you benefit, right?
Yeah.
Economically, culturally.
Yeah, it's a win-win. Potentially. But I guess there's always a flip side. What about fairness? Does everyone actually have an equal shot at this global education market? Or does it end up favoring certain students, maybe those with more money or those from specific countries?
That's a really important point. We can't forget about equity and access. As exciting as this globalized education landscape is, we got to make sure it's fair. We don't want to create new barriers for students who are already facing disadvantages.
For sure. And then there's this whole other layer, right?
Yeah.
Technology. I mean, online learning, blended learning, it's already changing the game.
Oh, it's huge. Imagine in the future, you could be taking courses from like 5 different universities around the world, all from your living room.
Create your own, customized degree program. It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It is. But of course, there are challenges. How do you make sure those online courses are actually good quality? Who's going to accredit them? And then there's the whole issue of the digital divide. Not everyone has access to reliable internet or the devices they need.
Yeah, technology can be a great equalizer, but only if everyone has the opportunity to use it. We can't leave anyone behind.
Exactly. So the future of international education, it's a pretty complex picture. It's like all these different forces at play, all pushing and pulling in different directions.
Australia, it's just one piece of the puzzle.
But it's a really interesting piece, isn't it? It's a story that's still unfolding.
Full of twists and turns, for sure. But ultimately, international education, it's not just about Australia. It's about the world. It's about connecting people, sharing ideas, creating a better future.
And it's something we all have a stake in. Whether we're students, educators, policymakers, we all have a role to play in shaping what this looks like going forward.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Something to take away.
Yeah, close your eyes for a second and imagine. Imagine a world where education truly knows no borders, where any student, no matter where they're from, can pursue their dreams, where technology helps us connect and learn from the best minds across the globe. What part will you play in making that happen? That's a powerful image, isn't it? Education without borders, everyone having that chance. It's something worth fighting for, I think.
Definitely. And look, there will be bumps in the road, that's for sure. But I am optimistic, about the future of international education. People want to learn, they want to connect with each other, and they want to make things better. That's universal, right? And education is the key.
I agree. I'm optimistic too. And I think listening to all of this, what's really struck me is that even with all the politics and the back and forth, everyone seems to get it. Deep down, they understand how important international education is, not just for students, but for everyone.
It's true. We've heard so many stories, so many perspectives, and at the end of the day, it's about the power of education, right? To change lives, to change the world.
Yeah. So we've reached the end of our deep dive. It's been a journey. Political storms, policy debates. We've even caught a glimpse of what the future might hold.
It's been quite a ride.
It has. And we hope our listeners, you've enjoyed it, that you've learned something. But most importantly, we want to encourage you, keep thinking about this stuff. Keep asking questions. Don't be afraid to dig deeper, Challenge what you think you know.
Because the future of international education, it's not some predetermined thing. We're all creating it together. The more we understand, the more we get involved, the better that future will be.
So true.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, that's it for this deep dive. It's been a fascinating exploration. We've uncovered unexpected alliances, navigated policy complexities, and grappled with a whole lot of uncertainty. But ultimately, we've seen how international education has the power to shape lives and connect us across borders.
Thanks for joining us.
And until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, keep diving deep, stay curious.